Hi everyone, welcome to the first lesson of making an illustration with me, CG. For this lesson, I'm going to talk about theory and intention for the illustration creation process. And here are the few pointers that I'm going to talk about. There are three kinds of illustration that I am more well versed with. First is graphic designs and murals. The second is pinups, and the third is narratives. For murals and graphic design, we always focus on very simple, centric focus kind of rules and composition. So to put it simple, if I were to draw like a focal point, right? From the zoom out, right, we know that we are looking at this circle. And then for this one, we are looking at this circle. And for this, right, we are looking at this circle right here because they are the brightest spot. We can also do a grayscale check to see what our eye is actually focusing on. Our eyes normally will go to the place with the highest contrast. So for this, it's actually here. And it brings us to the silhouette of the character. And for this is actually the head is the darkest area. Okay. So we will look at her first, and then our eye will flow around the composition based on the composition line you plan, right? For this, it's a fairly triangular composition. For this, we can see that there's a V shape going on that frames the character in the middle, and then we have four characters around it, right? The placement is actually not unintentional, and it's done with planning that it should go in a circle, so it creates sort of like a flow to the eye, right? And for pinups, normally I would focus on the character itself and render them. And they are normally looking at the character. They are posing for the camera. So there's no storytelling. It's just flat out designing the character, drawing them in either the sexiest pose or a pose that actually represent them. And then staring into the camera would probably give them more vibes to it. For this one, Sweetheart Sona fan art that I did, it's a little bit different. So there's a flow here. And she's looking somewhere else because I wanted to try to make her, to give the feel of the wind and her playing the music. It's probably a little bit of a gray zone towards the narrative kind of poster that I usually draw. And yeah, we can definitely like go the narration. Because, for pinups, it's just finding a good pose, finding good lighting, and then just posing the character, showcasing the best way possible that you can frame them in the shot and then draw them. Okay, I'll talk about lighting later, so let's move on to narratives and action. So the kind of poster that I do for narratives would be that we will need to talk about story, right, in your painting. So in this case, of course, we are going to look at this girl. She is the biggest subject in entire piece. Biggest subject. Biggest. I should use a red color line. And she's a succubus, therefore the sexy pose that I gave her, the curve in the spine, the way she stands, and she's grabbing a card, probably just finished a meal. The setting of the environment shows that she's in either a castle or a cathedral kind of setting. So in a piece like that, you generally want to list down the things you want to convey about this character. And for this Samus piece, is definitely a little bit easier. I blurred out the background. The background is some futuristic, maybe sci-fi kind of city. And she's battling in the rain. She's going against the rain. And she's holding a gun with broken armor everywhere, right? So this is telling you that she is injured and she's still going for a fight. Like people, like fans of Samus would know that she never reveals her head, right? So if her armor is broken and she's still charging, that shows how much of a dire straits situation the battle is. Right? And for this one, she's dashing towards the camera, so I actually reference a little bit of League of Legends kind of splash art. So she's dashing through using her attack, using her spear to swing through the enemy ranks, and dashing towards the camera. And using motion blur, using the line to guide us through to this character. Yeah, that's a trick for composition, right? But of course, narratives is not just a pose, right? You gotta have elements that tell the story. Composition is the first layer, right? All this painting on top is the first layer of composition, right? How do you frame your character? How does your eye flow? How do you pose the character? And then how do you tell a story after you pose the character and finish the composition? And so they go step by step, and they do follow certain rules. Like I wouldn't say the easiest to do would be this, but for this kind of mural and graphic design poster, you generally only need simple shit like circle, triangle, squares to decipher like the composition of the piece. And then it goes to pinup where it gets a little bit more complex because you're gonna deal with big shapes like, for example, this character. This Succubus character, she has a wing, right? She has a wing. And how are you going to plan like where do you put the wing, right? Because the wing would be like that, coming to the foreground, covering a little bit. Maybe this wing can even come like here, right? And then covering. So you gotta always try different way to, improve the composition with the element that already existed in this piece. And also, like for this character, Sona, Sweetheart Sona from League of Legends. If let's say we take out the background, of this character. It feels like we have some empty space around her, right? But I have decided like, okay, this is how we are going to see her. I want to crop her at thigh level. And then how am I supposed to plan a composition to aid this character pinup, right? And then I realized, like, after several attempts of exploring and doodling the background, but I realized, like, because she's currently like appearing to a triangle, she has a flow here, right? And then she has also like, okay, I did the Atlas because that's like the last thing you want to do to influence your composition. And I realized, okay, maybe if we draw two lines like that, it feels more it feels easier to read this piece because we can read diagonally down like that into a detail and go back to the hair again. It creates a circular loop to the piece versus like that, right? If I draw it like that, it's not like it doesn't work, but it just there's too many parallel lines. The hair is parallel to this line, and then this hand is parallel to this line. So there's a lot of parallels. If I were to do a parallel line like that, I will make sure this bow, this cushion will also be parallel. So everything would go with this parallel kind of composition and directional line. Right, so at the end of the day, I pick this and I feel that it makes the picture reads better as well. And then let's move on to lighting. Talk about lighting. For this kind of mural and graphic design posters, I generally reference very abstract kind of art and experimenting with different brushes. And the most important thing would also be, other than the shapes, is going to be values. That's why I focus a lot on values when I do pieces like that. Yeah, and a lot of time, why murals is fun for me, it's also a practice for me because you can draw so many abstract stuff and it doesn't have to mean much, but it gives you space to explore values. It gives you space because you can be like, okay, this doesn't need to be, the background doesn't need to be a sky, the background doesn't need to be a forest or whatever. But when it comes to backgrounds, like pinups or like narration, especially narration, you need background that tells a story, right? So doing murals or the graphic design poster like that, you already have one thing lesser to think about, like environment. You don't have to think about environment. You just have to think about values. How does the negative and positive space help with the entire pieces? And then with that practice in mind, when it comes to future illustration, like even pinup with a simple background, you know how to use values to frame your characters. You know how to give values. Even like, let's say I want to add a blossom here, like forward, like a blossom tree here. Like, how do I put it in a way that it doesn't stray away, or it doesn't take away too much attention from my character? Or it could even be a sky that's blurred, item that's blurred, and then yeah, so we can definitely learn a lot just by doing this kind of poster design. And then, okay, let's talk about lighting. So I think for lighting, it's easier to talk about it in the pinup stage, right? For pinups, normally I draw the character first, and I wouldn't even think about the background first, because I want to make sure the character look good by themselves. If let's say I remove the background, she must already look good. She must already look good in this composition. She herself is a composition. And if this is not good, maybe you should try a different pose or try to find ways to give her better silhouettes. Right, and then afterwards you can think of more elements that help to push your piece even better, right? So in this case, I normally like them in a very studio kind of lighting, so that I can do color balance and everything to her, right? So in this case, the light probably comes from like behind her. That's why there's a cast shadow right here. That's why there's light right here. There's light right here. Yeah, and then afterwards, I would simply just use I would just find a way to draw like those simple composition line and add elements to it. Like, okay, I would like to have like a line pointing in. I would like to have like circular shape pointing like that back to her, right? And then all these elements that I add behind will enforce the composition even more. Right? They are all pointing back to her. They are all pointing back to her. Right? And yeah, and sometimes it depends on the piece. So for this is very studio lighting. For this is a little bit more of a diffuse lighting kind of vibe. But the reason being why the lighting is more diffuse right here is because I wanted to show more details. And because once you have dramatic lighting, you probably only have one line. And the problem with dramatic lighting sometimes is that you will change too much of a skin color, and that will result in like things getting harder to read. And yeah, I probably use dramatic lighting more on my narrative posters. But for pinup like that, I generally go for a much more diffuse lighting. Like let's say, if I add a very strong light here, very strong light, very strong light, and then afterwards you have to check the value, and then I have to adjust everything again. And then at the end of the day, if she looks too dramatic and there's a harsh shadow casting around her face, that will definitely ruin the beauty of the character. Normally, when you showcase character, you want to put them in a much more subtle kind of lighting so you can see more details. And for me, I have a tendency of like putting softer lighting on the face so we can read the face more. Sometimes if you are doing something more dramatic, like you want to make a scary scene or very horror scene, you probably want to use more dramatic lighting. But for me, I focus a lot more on the face, so I will always give softer lighting to the face so that we can showcase the face more.